This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. My name is Angelica Solitska. I'm your host and the founder of the Voice of Early Childhood. And today I'm joined by Dr Sue Allingham, who is an early years consultant, author and trainer, and Nicky Turner, who's the national lead for early years for Astrea Academy Trust. So thank you very much both for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So this is the second episode in the series outlining the BrainSet Learning Environments project that the Astrea Academy Trust is carrying out across its early years phase with the support of Dr Sue Allingham. So just as a quick recap, Dr Sue, you are the best person to talk about this. What is BrainSet? We'll get straight into it. What do we mean by BrainSet? What is it?
What is BrainSet? Well, I am very honoured to be the UK, and apparently in this last week I've been called the senior trainer in the UK. I am actually the only trainer in the UK. But anyway, this is Dr Catherine Murray's lifelong work in many ways. And I think Catherine's on a podcast already for you, isn't she?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right.
BrainSet. So it is just the word brain, and then capital S, capital E, capital T. And the S stands for safety, the E stands for emotions, and the T stands for thinking. And to put it in a nutshell, it's basically Catherine's work has looked at how our environments that we prepare for our early years children work with how their neurodevelopment works. So basically, it's all about brain development. And her strapline, and obviously mine as well now, and hopefully all of the Astrea Academies, is a calm brain is a thinking brain. Mm-hmm. So basically, we've been working with environments and provision as to how they support the children emotionally in line with where they are in their brain development. Mm-hmm. Does that sum it up?
Yeah, thank you. I really love that strap line. And I've heard it a lot when I've been visiting the different schools at Astrea Academy Trust. So, Nicky, so this is a really important project for the Astrea Academy Trust, isn't it? In terms of really looking at the environments and all of the different schools and the educators looking at their each unique classroom setups, I believe indoors and outdoors as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the reason why we chose to start this project is that we want our children to be ready to absorb all of the learning that is going to be available for them in school. So we need those children to feel safe. We want them to be emotionally secure, because then they're able to think. So it's exactly what Sue has said. A calm brain is a thinking brain. We want these children to be in the best place possible and ready to absorb all of that learning. So we've done quite a lot of work previously on the environment and about continuous provision and enhanced provision and how to organise your classroom. But this is completely different to that.
Well, it's kind of the same but different, isn't it? Because once you start thinking about what your environment looks like, this is kind of the next layer. Mm. And I really like your use of the word available. So the children are available for the learning. Mm. Because if you are scared or you don't understand what's going on, your emotions are shot to pieces and you don't feel safe, you're not available to understand what your adults are talking about, are you?
Mm. So the work that we've done previously was about kind of like organisation of resources and furniture. I'd started to do some research about how lighting, colour, noise, how that impacts on children's learning. It was very fascinating what I found out. And then we kind of got together. I think it was at Nursery World.
Well, do you know, I was reading your notes earlier and I cannot remember how we met or where you found me.
I remember being in a podcast with you and Jane McNee.
that would be
when
it.
it was lockdown, and then I was on some of your training for curriculum development, and I just thought, oh, I like the way that this lady thinks. I felt I've got a connection with you. We're on the same sort of vibe. So I thought, yes, I would like to work with you. So yeah, well, then I met you in Nursery World.
We have some very important conversations, don't we?
I think, Nicky, in the last episode where you talk with Asma, who is the primary regional director for Astrea Academy Trust and the strategic lead for early years as well, Asma Maqsood Shah. So there you talk about how you met Sue, I think, as well. So we'll have to recap on that. But yeah, in that episode, you spoke about the context of the Academy Trust and how this project started. So in terms of kind of where you are now, what kind of changes have you seen so far as the national lead for the trust? Yeah. Firstly, so the changes for the educators, how has this project impacted them?
What I find now is that our educators, they really understand why we're doing things, why this should be in place, rather than thinking, I just need to put a voile up, I just need some nice kind of like neutral colours and some, nice rugs. That's just surface level. They understand the why. What it's based on that research. They understand it. They know about it.
So it's research informed.
It is. It's research informed. It isn't just kind of like a token gesture. Oh yeah, this is what you need to do. It needs to be all neutral. Let's get some.
It looks nice, and that's all it is.
They understand why they're doing what they're doing, and I have seen a transformation of learning environments. And I think because the educators understand what they're doing and then they're seeing the benefits, it really motivates you to do more.
Yeah, when you see the impact on the children.
When you see the impact, the environments just look completely different because of their use of natural lighting has been one of the major changes that settings have made, is to switch off, the big strip lights that we have in classrooms, gone. And then the impact that actually has on reducing a kind of like an energy in the class. It's more of a calm energy now. And that's really helped those children that need to listen carefully, because EY it's a busy, there's lots of noise, isn't there, in EY? But since we've been on this project, the noise levels in class has reduced, but the learning has increased. So it's like children are busy doing things, they're really involved.
So it's not
noise, it's calmer.
It's not like there's not much going on anymore. It's just they're more, I guess, settled.
Yes.
It's one of these things that you can't actually, it's not tangible, but you have to be in it to spot it, isn't it? I think, Nicky, didn't you tell me a story about the children actually asked for the lights to be turned off because somebody put the light on?
Yes. So it was when I was at Edenthorpe and I was around the light box, and the classroom doesn't have any like the artificial big strip lights on anymore. It's natural light and ambient light. We were around the light box and we were really deeply engaged, telling stories. And then suddenly someone came in who doesn't normally work in the class, switched the lights on. Do you know what? It completely changed the atmosphere and the way that we could focus, because I felt it myself, how you can focus on the storytelling. It kind of just shut it down straight away. And then the children kind of like looked up and, we don't have the lights on in here. But I felt it myself.
Yeah.
The difference. And Sue, the other day when we were at Hartley Brook, and in one of those rooms where, they've got the lovely use of ambient lighting now, and then they switched the strip lighting back on, and it was such like it kind of shocked us. Do you remember it?
I do remember it, yes. Because it's very harsh, isn't it, the artificial light in school?
Yeah.
And I don't think people realise. And also as well, I think, have I said this before on the podcast? I can't remember. But my sister pointed out to me that the light bulbs and the fluorescent lights that we have nowadays have a very high frequency flicker.
Oh, right.
And if you're a migraine sufferer, which my sister is really badly, I am too, but not in the same league as my sister, she can see it. So I don't quite know what we're doing to our children by having all these modern lights.
And the example that I just gave from Eden thought when we were around that light box, I'm just, the amount of thinking that I was doing myself, the engagement that I had with those resources, because the focus is on that rather than, all of these bright
everything
lights.
That's going on.
When you think about safety, emotion, thinking, myself being engaged with those resources, I could think. I was really highly involved in using those resources and telling the story. And then when the lights came on, it had gone. So I felt it myself, not just through going in and like looking and observing, but I've engaged with the classroom resources. I know what it feels like when you use those brain set principles. And I know what it feels like when those brain set principles are no longer in place.
Yes.
It's quite profound. It's like a jolt, isn't it, Sue? When they switch the lights on at Hartley Brook, it's like a jolt. So what impact does that have on a day-to-day basis?
As I say, I wish you could sort of bottle that feeling, but you can't. You have to be in it to feel it. And it could be, obviously the schools that we've been working with, the changes are on sort of a scale, aren't they? Some have made tiny but very important changes. Some have just gone way and changed lots of stuff. But even the smallest changes have made the significant difference, haven't they?
Yes, at Atlas, where in the nursery they've made that new enclosure with that beautiful, and how they've said that the children go in there and they're feeling safe, the children can relax. And we saw one child, didn't we, engage with that area.
Well, I actually went in and sat in it too. And that was really, because I do that when I'm in classes. Nicky will vouch for this. I disappear onto floors and behind cabinets and look at it all from children's eye level. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I can still just about get up off the floor again. But I can often be found sitting behind a cupboard or sitting in a recalibration space just to see what it feels like. And sometimes when you sit at the front of the classroom environment, where the I wish part of this project actually was removing all whiteboards from classrooms, but that's another story. But if you sit in the front where the whiteboard is and look into the back of the environment and see what's happening, sometimes that can be quite intimidating when you're only small. So when you sit on the floor and look through, but the difference that's being made with how people attract eye lines and look at the wayfinding. We saw a classic one of those, didn't we, with wayfinding?
Yes, was that at Atlas? Where
that was Atlas too.
That central area.
Yeah, there's like a big run-through corridor type space that goes between two areas of the classes, which of course, if the youngest children see a straight space, they'll run, won't they? But what they've done very neatly is zigzagged a couple of tables so that it's a bit like, well, you can go that way or you can go that way, and you might want to see what's in that way. So it takes the eye in a different way. And of course, it then also prevents the running through.
And what they have said as well, since they changed how cabinets, tables have been placed, because this was the arts and crafts area.
Yes.
And children... You'd be surprised they didn't go into the arts and crafts area.
Well, no, because basically you could just run past it, couldn't you?
Just run past it. But since they've made the changes, they said that they had 15 children all around, wanting to join in with this. So they're having to think about how they can extend it all now, because it's become suddenly so popular.
Yep.
Because of the wayfinding and drawing children's eyes and making them kind of think, oh, yes, I want to go over there.
Wayfinding's an important part, actually, isn't it, of this safety, emotional thinking stuff. Because children realise actually there's something interesting over there, and because there's a route through to it, I can go there. Then I think differently. And we've done quite a lot, haven't we, with just taking cupboards a bit away from the wall. So there's a way in there and there's a way in there. I think all of your settings have cornered the market on buying garden arches as well.
It's like when tub trays suddenly took off and the sales of tub trays go
because
through the roof.
the addition of some kind of arch, it doesn't have to be a built-in garden arch. It can be a drape of fabric or some camouflage netting or something like that. But something that thinks, oh, that's interesting, I want to go through that and see what's on the other side.
Do you know what, Sue? I'm just thinking about Gooseacre, because when we went to have a look there, the way that they've done the wayfind, you know, where they had the recalibration space with the lovely like canopy, it draws you in, and it's almost like going into a magical world, going through like this portal. And you're drawn into, oh, I want to go and explore through there.
Hiya! Just quickly, I wanted to ask a favour from all of the listeners and viewers. It would really help this podcast if you subscribe on the platform you are listening or watching on. This will help the Voice of Early Childhood podcast to continue putting out thought-provoking and reflective episodes with a range of guests. And if you are enjoying listening to this podcast, please do share it with someone else who you think would love it too. And of course, as always, we encourage you to share your voice too. If you have reflections, thoughts, and comments, please do share this episode on social media with your comments and tag the Voice of Early Childhood. Let's keep these thought-provoking discussions going. Thank you. I'll let you get back to the episode now. And all of these places that you're describing, sorry, Sue, I'm just going to say, all these places you're describing seem really, so I haven't, well, I guess the viewers as well and listeners, trying to picture in our heads what this looks like. And it all sounds really exciting and little bit mysterious, like you were saying, Nicky, you know, being drawn into these spaces and, you know, what's inside or what's through the other side and what's over there, and just really kind of almost like curiosity led. So you don't just have a normal kind of space that looks like every other classroom.
And much more like homely as well.
I think perhaps we need to be a little bit cautious, Angelica, with the word curiosity, because we're not talking about the curiosity approach, which is, I understand, another approach that you can adopt, which I've read about in various places. It's not that. This is very much more based around, and as I'm going back to what Nicky said earlier, enabling the children to feel safe, to be available for teaching, to be available for learning. Yes, it's like being at home, which again, people could say, well, that's very much like the curiosity approach that we've read about. But when we talk about it's like home, we don't mean it's about bringing lots of brown furniture from charity shops and stuff like that. It's about what home really is like. So keeping a home, I mean, I've always been a big person to advocate that home corners must be real, and if you can get real cereal packets and real this and real that and real knives and forks. I've always been a bit like that, but this is a significant part of the brain set approach as well, isn't it? It's like what will children recognise, what's familiar to them? And we've got dozens of photographs that at some point I suspect we're going to be able to put onto your site as well as part of the project. So it is about what children will really see in their homes, not necessarily stuff that might have been rescued from a charity shop, that kind of thing.
So things that really relate to the children.
And that's exactly it.
Yeah, so it's really understanding your children and their context and the community that they're in, and that kind of cultural capital, I guess, that relates to them, and not just this might be in any home anywhere that they've never seen before.
And in terms of like feeling like home, kind of like what I mean really is, you know how your home feels like your safe space.
Yes, that's
where
good.
You can go through your front door.
Being homely.
I'm safe now. This is a comfortable environment for me. I think the classrooms now have more of that kind of sense about them. That it is that safe space. space. Not that it's like, got items in from a home, but it's got that sense of, this is a safe space for me. I feel comfortable in my surroundings.
And that goes back to what Angelica was saying about it represents me. People here know who I am and know what makes me tick. Now, I can't remember. Sorry, go on.
I was going to quickly say a sense of belonging that it allows children to feel, doesn't it? More than this is a home environment that looks like a home. It's more that feeling that they get from it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And that goes back a bit as well to some of the recalibration spaces that we've seen. And I'm sorry, Nicky, but I can't remember if this was one of your schools or one of the other academies that we're working with as well. Was one of yours where there's a little girl who is a bit dysregulated, a bit worried about stuff, doesn't necessarily have a lot of English, but she's discovered the recalibration space and she disappears under there, and there's one child she feels safe with and they go in with her? Was that one of yours?
We did go into a school where a child has their recalibration space. It might have been one of ours.
It was definitely last week, but I can't remember now. I should say that Nicky and Rachel, the other lady I'm working with, whisk me around so many settings. I go a bit, can't remember who's which.
Keeping you busy.
Just a bit. It's great, though. I absolutely love it. And what's really nice as well is, Nicky said this earlier, teachers understand the why. And it is such a compliment to me that when I go up there, they're all saying, oh, we want you to come and see us, we want you to come and see us. And I feel so welcome when I go in the schools. And the head teachers are making me so welcome. And they're all saying what a difference they've noticed. And it might be, as I say, a tiny, tiny thing that's made a significant difference, or it might be a huge thing. But it's wonderful to work with a project where nobody feels intimidated.
Yeah. And Sue, actually, I was going to ask you, how do you work with the educators, especially right at the beginning when you were first getting to know them? What does this actually physically look like? So when you go into the classrooms, how is that support and change sparked? Because educators can feel quite even intimidated or maybe a little bit defensive of, this is our space, it's our classroom, we've created this, and now someone external is coming in and wants to change everything. How does that work? How do you work with the educators to support them through that?
I wonder whether Nicky's better placed to talk about how I work than I am, but that has also been fascinating to me as well, because I am very much of a work alongside and have a professional conversation with than a doer too. I don't inject people with the answers, and because I don't know the answers. Remember, I'm doing flying visits to all these schools 3 times a year. I don't live and breathe and work in them, whereas Nicky knows them really well. They have all been so welcoming that I don't think anybody has been bothered. In fact, I got blown away the first week by going into places and having a chat with them, and they go, oh, let's go and do that now. And it was like, right, okay then, should we? And this was like, in the middle of the day. Oh, right, okay, well, should we just go and move everything around now then? And it was like, oh, right, I was just going to write you some notes, It's been very proactive, and I've just been blown away by it. And it was a bit like, and I know that that very first day when we did the first conference and we were in the Hill, and then you, Angelica and Nicky, you walked around the nursery with me and Sarah, and I think you recorded us. And she even changed some things that night and experimented with them, didn't she? And then I think the next day or the day after we went in, some of those things hadn't worked. Well, that doesn't matter. Because you can't tell what's going to work when the children aren't there necessarily. But it's that whole openness to, do you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to try that. Or that might not work for us, but do you know what we could do? I just don't know. I mean, Nicky, what do you think? Because we do move a lot of furniture, don't we?
Yes, I know. But I think because this is coming from like a research base.
That's it.
That people, know that it's genuine.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're coming in and, with a tick list and you've got to have this and you've got to have that. It's working alongside the practitioners, looking at the needs of the children, looking at the layout of the room. It's very kind of like individual. And I think so you're just really kind of like natural and able to connect with people. And it feels more developmental than judgmental. And I think that's
that's nice. Mm-hmm. Can I have that as my new strapline?
Because I think when people, it is very judgmental, isn't it? When you're a teacher, you feel like people are coming in judging you, and that can cause feelings of like anxiety and fear. And then you might get that kind of like fight or flight. But this is not about...
Do you mean an amygdala hijack?
Yes. Yes. So it has a really developmental feel to it. It doesn't feel like that threatening kind of, sense that, I've experienced it in my teaching career.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. It's nothing like that at all. It's like you're one of us, you're on our side, and you want to develop us. And I think that's how people feel. That's how I feel.
That's been ever since I first started as an early years advisor in the local authority all those years ago. I have always felt that it's very important in roles such as ours that you don't tell people what to do, because you can't know. When you're only in there 5 minutes and they live it 24 hours a day, you can't tell them what to do.
No.
And I know in the last episode we talked about the educators feeling that sense of ownership of their own space as well. And that's really what you're talking about here as well. And I think it really helps with this project that you're not just coming in and working with them and then leaving. Actually, it's a whole ongoing annual year-long project, isn't it?
Yes,
and the educators are part of the training.
Now. This isn't just kind of like a flash in the pan. We'll look at this year. This is kind of like how we will be working. And our educators, they're using the brain set principles, but when you go into the learning spaces, they're all individual as well. So it's not about it has to look like this. There are principles to work for, but everybody's rooms look different.
Well,
do you think so?
Absolutely, because everybody's in a different sort of building, aren't they, for a start? And everybody has a different sort of children. And I think that's significant, that we've got quite close to very diverse classes, haven't we? And so the teachers who work with them have had to think about things in a different way. I mean, they would have done anyway without me being on the periphery of it all. They would have twiddled about with their environments. But sowing the seed of actually this is where the children are developmentally, and looking at it from a neuroscience perspective and seeing it as much as we can through the eyes of the children, I wonder whether that's made a difference for them as well.
Yeah. And the fact that they can trial things out.
Yes.
Because it is called practice, isn't it? Early years practice.
Absolutely.
So it's like you can try things. Oh, I remember in Sarah's where we moved, it was like, let's make a gap there. Let's put up, little enclosure there. And it didn't work. But that's fine because this is research. This is about practice, trying things out and experimenting, because we are learning all the time.
Yep.
That is such a great mindset to instill in these educators. And like I was going back to, having that sense of ownership of their environment and really allowing them, encouraging them to reflect themselves. So, it's not just when they do the training and not just when Dr. Sue is visiting or yourself, Nicky. It's when, so they're constantly reflecting on their work and their children and really embedding that in their busy schedules.
And what's been so good as well is that in between live stuff, like last week when I was with you and things, we also then catch up on Zoom, don't we, with the teams that are doing it.
Yeah.
So And I get so many photographs, and that's really nice as well. People aren't worried about sharing pictures. And people get really excited about what they've changed.
Yes.
One that's stuck in my head, and I'm hoping it's one of yours, Nikki, because I get them all muddled up. There's like a tiny little space with a cupboard door at the end.
Yes, it's Castle.
It's Castle,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, really profound difference.
Oh, massive. And just in a tiny little dark cupboard space type area.
Yeah, but she's not kind of like had a complete overhaul, but she's just changed a few little bits and bobs.
And that's the point, isn't it? It's not about spending a load of money or moving a load of things around. It's like that tiny little dead space at Kingfisher that you can walk into.
Yes.
Which is only about as wide as a doorway, isn't it? Which in many a place would just be a dumping ground.
Yes, it would. It would. It become that EYFS cupboard dumping ground.
It is. It's about rethinking all of that and what does it look like for children.
And that what they've done in that space is really clever.
Yes, it is. And again, that invites you in, doesn't it? Do they call it reading garden, or did I dream that?
I can't remember what used to be called, but now it's like the sand area.
Yes,
it's
yes.
Great because it's got the doorways at child height.
It's lovely. It's like a magic door, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a mouse hole.
Yes.
It's really exciting. And then the porthole window. It's a very clever use of that space.
Well, it is. And again, that's the kind of space that in perhaps another place with another set of adults would be we don't like that space because we don't know what the children are doing in there. But actually, do you know what? Let them have a go and see what happens. And again, that could have become a dumping ground.
Yes.
But now that the sand is in there, it's a lovely enclosed. It would be lovely to do a video through the porthole, actually, or have a CCTV camera in there.
Yeah.
And do some footage of the children.
Do you know what, Sue? I really like what you've said there about, practitioners having the confidence to make these decisions, and that this must be good for them because they feel that they have some autonomy to make decisions and to try things out.
And they know why, and I think that's important. You said why earlier.
Yeah.
It isn't just buying a package of stuff that you've seen somewhere on social media or something, and buying into somebody's idea on Pinterest or something and then just doing it at the risk of being pompous. It's pedagogical, isn't it? It's understanding the science and the art of why you're doing it, rather than just saying, I saw this on Pinterest, it looked really good, I'm going to do that.
Yes, because I think once you understand the why, then you can develop your own thinking around it and discover new things. So it becomes a real kind of cognitive exercise for us, because we're thinking about our own practice in terms of, this is research. I've got these children here, and it's like a research project. What works best for these children? How can we enable them to learn the best that they can? How can they be available for what we're going to provide in this classroom? So it's just, I think, becomes more of a thinking exercise, that it's teaching practice, it's research, and we're working with developing brains, and there's a lot to know about developing brains. So it becomes more of a research, rather than just being like a teacher delivering stuff.
Yeah, that's really a good point
about what we're doing and why, and what impact has that had on these children. What have I done? What do I see? What does that tell me? What am I going to do next?
That is a really interesting point about the teacher delivering stuff, because with the best will in the world, we are now in a climate, aren't we, of delivering stuff and set times to deliver stuff and how it should look when it's delivered. I'm kind of thinking, and I've seen this, I know, in a couple of places, that because people are thinking differently now. The practice as best they can, because I know some of these things are very structured because that's the way that they are made to be taught. I kind of think there's a bit of tweaking going on, especially the environments in which these things happen, which might make it easier for the children on the receiving end of it.
Yes, I know that, when I talk to my EY educators, that they're feeling now they understand child development much, they've got more knowledge about it and are making decisions around the children that they've got. And that's through all of this work, Sue, because it's research based and understanding the developing brain. I think it's giving them the permission to make decisions that are the best decisions for this group of children.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because also, as well, they've got, all of this revolves around the elements and the pillars, doesn't it? Which now would be really good if I could bring up a slide and show what it meant.
But tell us all about it, Sue.
I need a reference point for that, and I haven't got one handy, which is a nuisance. But basically, all of the schools have all of the relevant paperwork that goes with all of this brain set approach. And as I haven't got one handy, which is really annoying, I should have thought of that beforehand. But basically, there are 3 circles in a Venn diagram, which are the SET circles, so the safety, emotions, thinking circles. And within each of those, you then got levels, different things to think about, which are part of each of those things. And each of the teachers now has those. Well, they've had them a couple of times now, haven't they? And they're using those and remembering how each of those informs their environment. Nicky, you haven't got one to hand, I suppose, have you?
I haven't, no, because it's on my laptop. I haven't got a printed version. But Sue, another thing that you will be pleased to hear, we're going to have a Teams with this educator. Beth has started to use the planning materials.
Has she? Because I was coming on to that next.
And through the planning materials, they are beginning to understand they're thinking more about the nature of children. So what is it? That's their nature. What do they need? What are the implications for this environment?
That's really interesting because the planning materials, and again, Kathy and I put these together and we were very clear that we are not creating a rigid structure that everyone has to plan to. It was an idea that we came up with sitting together on a Zoom meeting like this, that we wanted to draw the thinking together and put it out in a kind of planning format that people may want to use or draw thinking from. That, what's the word I'm looking for? That recognised the importance of safety, emotions and thinking and put them out through a planning format specific to children. And I have just found the design elements. So basically there are 3, as I say, Venn diagrams. The join in the middle, obviously as a Venn diagram does, but the design elements for survival are defined spaces, wayfinding, ceilings lowered, acoustics, lighting, rounded corners. Now that for me, who is always walking into tables, and do you know what I came back with on last week Friday with such a huge bruise on my left hip, and I've got no idea how I did it, but it's one of your schools. The whole softening down of the environment for safety's sake. If you're sitting listening to your adult in the meeting space and all you can see is hard edges and pointy things and sharpness and bright colours, that's not a safe environment, is it? That's a bit scary. And then when you start to think about when you're planning for the children, and you just mentioned Beth is using the planning. So you've got the thinking spaces and all the things that you might want to go into the spaces for learning. Do I know this child's comfortable in this particular space, or would that child be better if I sat at a table with them, or in a quieter room with them, or away in a sort of shaded corner where there's not so much hustle and bustle. That's all part of your planning, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And part of the planning for each individual child, like you say, it's looking at individual children and not just the whole class and the whole cohort.
Exactly that.
And so for viewers and listeners, the Venn diagram that Dr. Sue is talking about actually is on the article by Dr. Catherine Murray, who writes all about brain set. It's called Aligning Learning Environments with the Needs of the Brain, and that can be found on the Voice of Early Childhood website, and the diagram is there and explained also with all the different parts that Dr. Sue also just told us about. So that can
Thank you, Angelica. You'd think we planned it, wouldn't you? But no, I mean, I say that we would never insist that anybody did the planning as we wrote it on 2 or 3 different bits of paper. But as a start point, I'd be interested to see where Beth goes with it.
Yeah, we'll look at that when we meet. Yeah. I think she'll really enjoy talking you through what she's done.
I shall enjoy listening to her talking about it. That's soon, isn't it?
So what the conversations that we're having today, the discussions, really are reflecting on the educators' journeys with this project. So it's really nice to be able to hear those snippets, like when you mentioned, both of you, the different schools and the different educators. It's so nice to see it as a whole project. Like you were saying, Nikki, I was going to say the beauty of this is also not that it's just more than just a one-off training or visit, and it is a whole year project. Actually, it is forever and ongoing, because these educators who are thinking about the needs of the children that they have now and acquiring these skills as educators to think about, the needs of their children, the needs of the brain. They then, when the next cohort of children arrive in September, they need to think completely differently. And every single time they think, what are the needs of these children? How can we support them? How can we change the environment to support these particular children? So everything is always changing, isn't it? And throughout the year as well, because the same children's needs change as they grow and develop.
We saw that, didn't we, so clearly in AAS.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that environment from the first visit to the third visit 2 weeks ago has changed and grown and developed to meet the needs of the children.
And the impact that Lisa has had on those children, with those children, is incredible.
Oh, I mean, that's a book in its own right. But it is quite incredible. Really? It's exactly what you just said, Angelica. The whole point of all of this is it's about the children you see in front of you. It's that Lois Malaguzzi quote about the environment you plan for your children is not one that I'm going to say it bought from Pinterest or a curriculum or something. It's not a preconceived notion. It's the one you develop with the children you play with and interact with, which is a hugely cannibalized version of what Malaguzzi actually said, but you get the point. And I'm a bit anxious that this is not seen as one of those things you take off Pinterest or social media, which is what I mentioned earlier on. It's not like that. It's very much.
And this is sustained. This is, when you just like take something off the shelf or you get an idea off Pinterest.
Yeah.
It's nothing like this. This is now kind of like part of people's thinking, and it's sustained and it will develop and grow. I think this is with us now.
Well, I'm kind of hoping I'm with you a bit longer as well.
Nikki, when you were saying it's sustained, it's very bespoke as well, isn't it? And everything that the educators are doing, all the changes they're making, all of their learning and reflections and the progress is all down to the specific settings, the specific schools, the specific classrooms and the children as well. So every single classroom and all the changes will be completely different, even across the Astrea academies that are working together, let alone other schools.
I think that's a really vital point. It's not a branded thing that means everybody's got the same piece of furniture, the same classroom layout, albeit they're all in different types of building. It's not about you have a this there and a that there. it's about what works at the moment with the children we have, with the adults we have. And there's the other point as well that has made me think, and it made me think a lot when I was with you last week. I think there's a lot of mileage in thinking about brain set for adults too.
Yeah.
Because if the adults aren't comfortable with what's happened, it is not going to work for the children.
No. And do you know what, Sue? I think when I go around and I see these spaces and I talk to the adults, I think the adults are happier in these spaces.
Interesting. I mean, we like to think, don't we, that our brains are fully developed now.
Well, I was going to say, if it's really impacting the adults as so much, and like you mentioned earlier, even yourself, Nicky, feeling calmer and feeling more engaged when you're with the children with the dimmed lights and in those environments, then we can just imagine the effect, the impact it has on the children in being able to sustain their attention and being able to concentrate on what they're doing and what's interesting them.
Because, as an adult, you want to feel safe. You want to feel emotionally secure so you can think. So it's the same. I think it's the same for the adults.
I think there's a lot in, and that was definitely coming home to me a lot last week when I was up with you. And it was very interesting. And I think this was Gooseacre. Where did the power of not applicable come in? Was that Gooseacre? Yeah. I invented a new line, the power of not applicable, because we were talking about the planning. We were talking about planning boxes, and is it Joe, isn't it? Joe was talking about she feels she has to fill in all the boxes on everything. And I was talking her, she hadn't been at the one where I introduced the planning, so I was talking about it with her. And Kathy and I quite deliberately in our model put NA in lots of the boxes, because actually, if it's not relevant to that child or group of children, don't write anything.
That's absolutely fine, yeah.
But you know what it's like when you're faced with a format with boxes on it, you feel you've got to put something in them. So I've just had a very odd email come in there. Anyway, it was like the power of not applicable. And it's suddenly like, wow, so I don't have to do that. Well, no, you don't. And I've often felt... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to quickly say, it reminds me of when you said about the project gives educators permission to make decisions. This kind of gives them permission to be like, we don't need to think about this. We don't need to fill this in. We don't need to tick this box. It's okay. We don't need to fill this form in.
But that relies hugely. I mean, this is going to, if people watching this haven't necessarily taken in everything we've been talking about, that's going to sound as if I'm saying it's a free-for-all.
And it's not.
I was going to say, Nicky will know and Asma will know that the last 2 sets of sessions I've done, I actually have a slide that says this is not a free-for-all. Because it absolutely isn't. And that rolls all the way back to teachers understanding the why and being able to articulate it. And if it isn't working because of, that it's not right for that child, because that child at the moment is at this stage and they need whatever it is to help them through. And it might be that they need to, I'm sitting here at my built-in desk. It might be that they need to have a curtain hanging over the built-in unit and they need to get in underneath it every so often to just decompress their recalibration space. And if we are as adults in our environments feeling that we need something like that as well, then there's something not right, isn't there? So it's that educators having the power to say, actually, I'm going to do that and I won't do this because it's not applicable. So the power of not applicable. That's that's a whole other podcast.
Just because they haven't written something down to complete like a grid, fill in a box, it doesn't mean that they've not thought about it, because a lot of this is in your head thinking about what I'm going to do for these. I'm trying this out. You don't have to have it all written out.
Exactly.
But again, you are working on it because you're thinking it's it's very, it's hard work. You've got to,
really
what do I
hard
understand?
work.
What am I going to do as a result of what I understand?
Yeah. And I think that needs massively underlining, because it isn't a free-for-all. It's not chaotic. It's having a very clear vision of what you want these children to learn and how you're going to help them to learn it.
And it's the opposite of chaotic, because we've created these very calm, very purposeful spaces where children's involvement has increased because the environment is right. They can think now. So it's the opposite of chaos.
Right, there's another blog.
It's all very carefully thought out. There's a huge amount of thinking behind what practitioners have done, the why behind it.
Yeah, and I think that for me is possibly the most significant thing that's happened, and a compliment to me. Nobody, well, at least I don't think so, you all know better than me, but I don't think anybody is saying we're doing this because Sue said so.
No.
Because it's not because I said so, and it's not because Catherine trained me or Catherine said so. It's more than that, isn't it?
And it's because they know their children, don't they?
We've got the input where you're giving us the theory, the research, the why, and then people are going back and they're reflecting and they're looking at their rooms and their children, and then they're developing it from there.
And actually, to coin a phrase, it's not rocket science, actually. And I'm thinking about, and I can't remember the name of the school now, but it's the one where it's very awkward because they've got to come through her environment to get to the Year 1 class.
Oh, Edenthorpe.
Thank you.
Yes.
And she had in the little corner by the Year 1's doorway, she had a little kind of tent thing, which was potentially a decalibration space. But actually, because it was facing outwards, so the Year 1s would have to keep walking across it, just simply turning that round. So the entrance to the little tent thing was facing the wall and you could just sneak in and get in it. Completely different space.
Yeah.
So it's not rocket science, really. It's just thinking about things the other way around, isn't it?
And you know what, Sue? Taking the time to actually step back and think, and having permission to do that, because I think sometimes it's so busy in school that, you don't, it's like you feel that you haven't got time to do the things that you actually need to do, which is thinking about the children and your enabling environment.
Because that's statutory, and of course that rolls back. And as you both know, Kathy and I are doing a session in a few weeks' time. And obviously Kathy's Australian, now living in America, so I'm putting the English slant on all of this. And you just said enabling environment, which is statutory. We have those 4 statutory principles. And we also have the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, which are also statutory. And all of those are in this work. So none of this, and again, this is what I want to underline really heavily, none of this is just a bright idea. This is based in Kathy's thinking and Kathy's research. And okay, she's Australian now, living in America, but it's so clearly underpins and is underpinned by what we do for our statutory framework here, that it is no wonder that when Kathy and I first met in the first lockdown, and I say met, it was actually in a Zoom meeting in India, but as you do, it's no wonder that we realised how well we got on and then became friends, because our thinking is very aligned. So just to say, for anyone who's watching this who hasn't met up with Kathy's thinking or my thinking, this is not just me being trained to do something by someone who lives on another continent to overlay here. This is a meeting of minds that start in the very same place.
I love that, a meeting of minds. I'm going to note that down.
We've come up with some great sound bites today, haven't we?
And one of the things I was going to say, you mentioned a lot, decalibration space, or is it more recalibration space?
Sorry, I think it's recalibration space, yes.
To come back into, to kind of readjust, I guess. Is that what you mean? Is that what these spaces are for?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a beautiful photograph, and it wasn't part of this project, but I've used it in this work, that I took probably 4 years ago, maybe more, of a little boy in a year 1 class in a school not far from where I live. And I didn't even know Kathy then. It was before all of this. And this little boy knew his own levels, if you like. And he was in year 1, and I was in there doing some observations. And all of a sudden he disappeared. And I looked at his teacher, and his teacher said, "It's fine. He's got to his limit. He's taken himself off." And I've got a photograph of him. And there was a bookcase in the classroom slightly angled away from the wall. And this little boy had put a pillow in there. And whenever he needed to just go for a minute, he would go and lie face down with a book on this pillow behind the bookcase. The adult knew where he was. The other children knew where he was. And he didn't need to ask. He would just go. And it was all perfectly fine and perfectly safe. And of course, back in those days, I didn't know about brain set and recalibration spaces. But I thought that was brilliant. And this young guy, the teacher, I was very impressed with him, because sometimes in year 1, teachers are very anxious about curriculum, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that. But he was very measured in his approach, and he was only young. And he just knew that in order for that boy to reach his potential, he needed to understand what that boy needed. But of course, that's the recalibration space now, isn't it, in our thinking?
And I guess it's really allowing children that space to self-regulate, isn't it? That's
exactly
what it's all about.
That. And we understand now, don't we, so much of the importance of being able to help the child by co-regulating. But if you look at Twitter feeds these days, you have to wonder. I'm not going to go into political name places, name people.
No, this is probably a good place to wrap up before Dr. Sue starts.
Let's just go behaviours.
Going on a tangent. Well, thank you both for sharing more about the project. And so for the listeners and the viewers, some of you may already know that the Voice of Early Childhood has partnered with Astrea Academy Trust to share this project and the educator journeys. So you can find out more about this project by taking a look at the page, the project page, and the link is in this episode description. You'll also find Dr. Catherine Murray's episode and article, who's the founder of BrainSet. We've already mentioned her work and the article, so do have a look at that there. And the next episode, or next few episodes, hopefully we'll be hearing about the educators who have taken part in the project, really sharing their journey, so listening to their voices. And some of these people will be those who both Nicky and Dr. Sue have mentioned today on this episode.
Actually, I'm looking forward to hearing those.
Really?
So I won't have heard that perspective, will I? Well, not on the podcast way, anyway.
On the podcast, no.
No, it's going to be good to hear their voices and also to see their fantastic work we'll be sharing on the project page. So like you mentioned, both photos, and hopefully viewers and listeners and people who visit the project page will be able to then really kind of put into perspective some of the things that you were sharing here, and kind of visually be able to link, although it's different than being in the actual settings, like you mentioned, but still trying to really understand the project and the educator journeys
and the pictures
the
as well. Some of them are of the beginning. They take pictures as they go along, so you get to see what's happened and
the
how
before
it's
and after.
Yes. If they remember.
Yeah, I know that last time I was visiting, some of them forgot to take the before pictures, so they're like, oh no, but actually, it looks so fantastic now. Obviously it's nice to see the difference, but it's just understanding all the work that went into that and all the reflection that went into it, like what we were discussing. But that's all still to come. So thank you both for joining and sharing more about the project, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again soon.
Yes, thank you, Angelica.
Thank you, Angelica.
See you soon.
Thanks.